Welcome to the Convict Podcast, folks. I'm your host, Moliere Dimanche, and this is the fourth and final installment of Survive and Keep Turner. So, I made contact with my good friend Amanda Thomas. And I know a lot of you guys want to hear that interview, but here's the thing. She's willing to talk about it. You know, she's definitely willing to, sit down and discuss everything that's been happening. She's actually been out of the loop on all of this stuff. You know, she's living her best life. You know, she's a new mom, and you know she's enjoying her newfound motherhood. However, there was a hiccup in the process. I hit a roadblock. Unfortunately, her new man is not comfortable with her being alone with the convict for whatever reason. And I totally respect that. I'm not even gonna attempt to ask any questions about why or, whatever his problem with that may be. I'm just gonna fall back on that. Eventually, we may get around to it. It's completely up to her. Hopefully, she can work that out. But I don't want to, form any wedges in nobody's relationship because, the appearance of impropriety is more than enough sometimes, So, he was like, I don't want her being around no dudes alone. However that came about, it is what it is. You guys know how that go. She's a friend of mine, so I wouldn't want to, be the reason for any rifts in any relationships that she has. So I'm gonna just let that slide for now. And if me and Amanda get around to having that interview, it will be on the Convict Podcast, and I'll let you guys know immediately. So another thing, man, for my correctional officers, I know you guys tune in, and I welcome your input, and I actually would like to have some of you guys on the show to give the other side of the story because, as you know, I'm an ex-inmate. I have my personal views about you guys, and you may feel some type of way about that. You may feel like, there's another side to the story. All correctional guards aren't, what I put them out to be. However ludicrous your basis and thought is, whatever. You guys are more than welcome to do that, but do not ask me to, talk about issues that really aren't issues. I mean, for real, like asking me to talk about correctional officers being abused and they're underpaid, you cannot be serious about that. You cannot be, especially asking me to talk about some crap like that, because I'm familiar with the mortality statistics. Since the founding of the Department of Corrections, over 10,000 inmates have been killed there or have died. Do you know how many correctional officers have been killed by inmates since, over the last century, since the founding of the Department of Corrections? 6. Okay? And 2 of them was an accident. So, I mean, if I can count how many correctional officers have been killed by inmates on my hands, and it would take a small village of people to count on their hands the opposite, that's not a reasonable argument, and I hope you don't expect to see that covered on my podcast. I'm not gonna sit here and say, wow, correctional officers are underpaid. That's like me saying, well, I'm gonna go to McDonald's and get me some food, and if it's some spit in my onion rings, it's because they're underpaid. There ain't no justification for being malicious at all. If it's not paying enough, go get another job. All right. And for the correctional officers who like to harass my my supporters in the comment section, you say all of this wicked stuff, I'm just gonna block you. I anticipate that because that happens at least every other day. Y'all get in there and talk that crap. But if you guys want to have civil discourse and you guys want to come on here and paint a story that you may believe to be true, you're more than welcome to do that. But you ain't gonna be harassing my viewers, and you're not gonna get me to talk about the understaffing and hard work and underpay and all of that, because there are plenty of people who make half the money correctional officers make, and they ain't out there killing no damn body about it. So we're gonna start this segment off with inmate Katherine Keller. Now, this is bonkers. We already know this man Keith Turner's a scumbag. All right. Now, let me tell you guys something. The whole time that, when I first came to Department of Corrections, there was a correctional officer working at a facility that I knew from the streets. Okay. Immediately when I seen him, I'm like, wow, I knew you was a guard, but I didn't know that you worked here. I said, man, what's up with some McDonald's? You know what I mean? We'll work on the cigarettes later down the line, but give me some French fries up in here. And he brought them. Anytime he came through to do count, it was, hey, what you need? He wasn't bringing me no drugs or anything. He'd probably, give me a cigarette for me and my roommate to smoke personally, and he'd make sure that he brought me some French fries. He was a close friend of mine's father. So, he was an older gentleman, and, he wasn't down with, the contraband and all that, but he knew me from the streets. I cut his grass. So, I say that to say, if you see somebody in the Department of Corrections that from the streets, even if they are like a typical CO, it's got to be some kind of love there. So, Katherine Keller, not only does she know Keith Turner from the streets, she knows his whole family. Apparently, her grandfather and his grandfather were best friends. They served in the military together, and they worked for the state together. Her dad grew up with all of his uncles and his dad, and they're pretty much family. You know what I mean? Now, in childhood, even if you have people that you don't get along with, and you know them that well, in adulthood, especially if there's a situation where one of you guys are behind bars, there's gonna be some camaraderie there. There's gonna be a bond. She was trying to get the hell away from Lowell when she found out that Keith Turner was working there. It's like, hold up, this is somebody from childhood. Your grandparents are best friends. Your fathers grew up together and all of this stuff, and you trying to get away. You filed a grievance to get away from the camp? Wow. That goes to show you that this man was not just a scumbag behind bars. He was like an all-around piece of cheese. I guess they eventually transferred her, but she was somebody who knew him from the streets and filed a grievance about that. It's like, yo, I know Keith Turner from the streets. Get me from around here. That's a damn shame, because I'm sure everybody who's been to the Department of Corrections had that moment where they were like, man, if only somebody I knew was here. They can get in touch with my mom, or they can get in touch with my girl, or they can get in touch with this person and pull some strings for me on the low. And she was trying to get away from this man. So her grievance just demonstrates that this man was just an all-around bad dude. Next up, we have Quita Roosevelt. Now, this was a surprise. They get a grievance from inmate Chantel McPherson, right? Now, again, this goes back to what I was saying about, the women in the sexual relationships with Keith Turner were never the ones filing the grievances, right? This is the reason this surprised me is because, she's a black woman. And apparently, Keith Turner was in the day room hugging her and kissing her and making out with her. And then he took something out of his pocket and passed it to her. Probably some K2 or some cigarettes or something like that. And Chantel McPherson, she sees it, and she tells. Now, again, it's not the victims making the complaints. So if this is consensual, and this is something different. This is like, of course, they were most likely sexual partners, but for them to be making out, like kissing, this was something probably a little bit more than that. Maybe they were actually in love. He came across that one black chick that changed his mind. You know what I mean? And I didn't see anything like this with the other women. It was always about him giving them cigarettes in exchange for oral sex, or him, impregnating them or whatever. He was like, I guess he was getting his Casanova on with this particular inmate, and she was a black woman. So that was definitely shocking. But a lot of you guys did, put some comments in the video before the last one about whether or not this could be considered rape in all circumstances. I don't think I really got the answer I was looking for, because I honestly believe that some of these women would be highly upset if somebody, dropped a kite on them when they were, getting sex. Like who's to say women don't have the same sexual desires as men in prison? I know a correctional officer that used to work at Lowell, and he came to a different prison that I came to, and he told me that in food service, they have to chop up the women's hot dogs. Like they get the same, they get the same meals that we get at the male prisons, but from what he was telling me, they have to chop up the hot dogs like beanie weenies, like poking beans, and serve them to the women. Like the women don't get hot dogs on a bun. They have to chop them up to prevent the women from sneaking them back to the dorm to use as dildos. This is what a sergeant told me. And I was like, wow, if it's that serious, maybe they crave, sex as much as we do. So, was he really like the sexual menace that he's being painted out to be? I'm sure he was in certain cases, but was it in all cases? That's all I'm saying. It's a reasonable question, because we're all human, So next up, we have Bojan Johnson. Now, apparently, an officer named Mrs. Shiver put a hit out on Bojan Johnson, and Turner was the go-to man for the hits. I guess in order to keep the fear in the women, the staff members would let them know, I'll call Turner, and they get in line. So apparently, Miss Johnson did something that pissed Officer Shiver off to the point where she called Turner, and Turner came, handcuffed this woman, and dragged her all the way across the compound. And, for people who haven't been to prison, you have to understand that, when we say compound, we mean compound. It's not like, you drag somebody 10, 20 feet here and there. It's not like a county jail where there's limited space to move. Prison compounds are enormous. They're like huge plantations. So to be drugged from one end of the compound to another, that's a very long stretch. This was practically a dragging, and there's no telling if this encompassed her head hitting the ground, if she was dragged on her head or by her hair or what. It just said that he drugged her the same way that they said he drugged Cheryl Walmart outside of the prison, and they continued to beat her after he broke her neck. He drugged Miss Johnson the same way, all the way to the confinement units. So next up, we have inmate Brittany Poole. Now, this is a common practice that happens in the Department of Corrections. And as much as I talk about correctional officers, you think that I hated them all. I'd say about 99.99% of them I have no understanding for. But I had correctional officers who were my friends in there. And believe it or not, One of them worked at Swanee. And he's somebody I actually would consider. If I see him on the streets today, like, I would invite him to my home, And I mean, it was not even just him. I had a few correctional officers who I was really cool with, And it always started out as art, because I used to draw for their families. I used to draw pictures of their grandkids or their children, or I used to do tattoo patterns for their spouses and things of that nature, And they used to take care of me in there. And the correctional officers who I did art for, they often paid me by robbing other inmates. Yeah, they would go do shakedowns and confiscate all kinds of canteen and bring it straight to me. I knew what was going on, but it's like, damn, like I could go get this man back his canteen, or, like I was always in a really iffy position, because I'm like, all right, well, I got a guard on my team. At one institution, a guard, he gave me a shroud of protection, but that I know firsthand that, they rob inmates and give the canteen to other inmates. And when I first got to prison, my canteen was taken from me and given to other inmates. Ironically, by this woman named Officer Koger, who ended up, going to jail for having sex with inmates. And when she first took my stuff from me, a friend of mine told me, he was like, man, I think she might just like you. She might be trying to. I was furious, because when she robbed me, I was trying to pay the laundryman to get my blues together, because I always made sure wherever I had crisped up blues. And she robbed the money I was going to pay to the laundryman. If that was her way to get into my game room, she just messed up. She could have did it a different way, but she ended up going to jail for having sex with inmates. But back to Miss Poole. She went and bought $100 worth of canteen, and Turner saw that as an opportunity. He saw that, okay, I know I called out E-dorm for canteen. I know she lives in F-dorm. This is my chance to, go ahead and shake her down. So he goes and he asks her, why are you in the canteen line without permission? All of that stuff that you bought is contraband. If you don't want to go to the box, you need to go back to the dorm and shut up. He takes $100 worth of canteen, and the canteen orderly, Jennifer Gomez, verified this. The warden, Hope Gartman, she checks the property room evidence log, and they said, well, no canteen was brought up here, period. So without any documentation from the property room, she just essentially got robbed. You know what Keith Turner's gonna do with that? He's gonna take that, most likely he's gonna take that back to Quita Roosevelt, who he's apparently fallen in love with, and make sure that she's comfortable. You know what I mean? That and it's like that. You know what I mean? Even and I'm sure correctional guards will tell you this. Whether he had an affinity for her or it was a sexual relationship or whatever, I don't care how nasty a correctional guard is. Out of the thousands upon thousands of inmates, the tens of thousands of inmates in the Department of Corrections, even if a correctional officer is one of the ones that continuously kills inmates, all correctional officers are always going to have that one inmate that they gravitate to. I'm talking about the worst of the worst. And it was crazy, because the ones that I always gravitated to were sometimes at certain institutions, the worst of the worst. Like I come into a dorm and they be like, man, you got to watch out for that lady, man. She's a racist, man. She let the white boys smoke in the bathroom, and she lock up black dudes for sagging their pants. And she's bringing me food, and she's bringing me cigarettes. So I don't say nothing about it. I just let them think that this woman is a racist or whatever they thinking. Meanwhile, when they go to chow, I'm gonna do what I do, So next up, we have Angelina McClendon. And her case demonstrates that Keith Turner had a problem with lesbian women. Gay women was, I guess that was just something that got up underneath his skin. You know what I mean? She alleges that, he would harass them just for being gay. You know what I mean? I guess he, looked at him like, I'm a man, y'all women in here who are deprived, you should be all over me or whatever. The lesbians have no interest in that. And I guess that set him off. Like whenever he'd see a lesbian, he just called them names like carpet muncher and, you know, all of that lesbian crap. And she got tired of being harassed for her sexual orientations and decided to write it up. Her grievances were primarily about him, you know, threatening her and talking down on her for being a lesbian. Again, Hope Gartman, not doing a damn thing about it. Next up, we have Tara Olson. And she's alleging that they performed an organized cell extraction and banged her head up against the wall. Now, you know, it seems like at this point in time, Mr. Turner just had a whole change in heart. He went from, you know, raping all of the white women and beating up all of the black women to now he done found this black woman he's in love with. Now he's beating up all of the white women in the cell extractions. He goes topsy-turvy for a minute, and they go in here and they beat up this woman. And again, just like all of the black women, she speaks when the handheld recorder comes out, and, you know, she tells him, he banged my head up against the wall. Again, Hope Gartman, the primary respondent, doesn't do a thing about it. The same thing with inmate Jill Bojan. Organized cell extraction. And when the camera comes on, she says that they sprayed her for no reason. She wasn't causing a disturbance. One of these days is gonna take a lot of separate legal actions, and it might cost a pretty penny. I'm going to get a collection. I'm going to build a collection of every use of force that's happened in the Department of Corrections, just so you guys can see what this consists of. There's gonna be thousands. And out of those thousands, you will not see a single one that was recorded. Okay, now the way that these organized gassings occur, they come with the handheld camera and they warn you to cease your disruptive behavior. And if you cease, then they'll put the camera away. But if you start again when they turn the camera off, they're not gonna turn the camera back on to gas you. That's the loophole. So they'll come with the fake warning and turn the camera off. Then they do what they wanna do, then turn the camera on when they're pulling you out the cell. I mean, when I was in prison, there were cases where they did this and the camera would literally be sitting on the desk and they still wouldn't record it. And I'm gonna show you that all you're gonna see once I get all of this footage is inmates sitting on their bunk, the camera being turned off. And when the camera's being turned back on, inmates are being removed from the cell covered in orange residue. Out of all of these thousands, you didn't record one where somebody was actually doing something wrong. You know, we're gonna have to expose it. And I'm looking at Hope Gartman. Apparently she's a big dog now. You know, and Hope Gartman, you know, like I told you guys, she came from Swanee, man. And I actually watched her walk into a situation where an inmate was killed. If you guys want to learn more about that, get the book, it's all in there. Hope Gartman, you know, she moves on up, and now she's a director of institutions. You know what I mean? She went from her wardenship at Lowell to now she's a heavy hitter. And in my opinion, she's the primary person protecting Keith Turner. Now, for those of you who've appreciated this series on Keith Turner, I appreciate you. But I have some sobering news for everybody. Keith Turner's gonna walk on everything. He's gonna walk. And let me explain to you why. When government officials make mistakes, they're not really the first to admit that they've made a mistake. They'll lie about it and try to make it seem like they were trying to do the right thing the whole time, right? Keith Turner's mugshot and arrest got out by accident. Okay, let me repeat that. Everything about Keith Turner, it was not intended for public consumption. Okay. Notice the earliest reports of Keith Turner going to jail for molesting children. They never mentioned that he was the lieutenant from Lowell Correctional Institution. They just said suspect arrested, and they thought he was just an everyday child molester. They locked this man up, published his mugshot, not knowing who he was. So then, a day or two later, once social media puts two and two together, the media reports are now they're amending everything, and they're saying, "Oh, this is the same guy that was involved." It was well, no shit. We knew that. We were waiting on something. So now that they realize, oh man, this is the Keith Turner, they remove everything from the internet. Right now, you can't find his records in the clerk of courts. Right now, you can't find an arrest record with the Marion County Sheriff's Office. You can't find any bond information. He's out on the streets, and they don't feel that it's necessary to tell the public that an accused sex offender is in their midst. You know what I mean? Now, Mark Inch comes out with this bogus ass statement trying to, paint himself out like he's, swiftly acting on all of this stuff. Well, guess what? That same press release where Mark Inch talked about Keith Turner and how this was against their values and integrity, they removed that from the prison website. And it's crazy because all of the other correctional officers who went to jail, their press releases are still on there. Justin Allen, his press release is still on there. His information is still in the clerk of courts. They don't got the pull that Keith Turner has. They don't have the connections. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, this world is all about who you know. And I'm sure a lot of you guys know that already. It's all about who you know. With me, I'm trying to be an example of of proving that theory wrong, but in the end, that's what it is. It's all about who you know. And I know a lot of important people, and I deliberately choose not to use them for what I could benefit from them from, because I would feel like a leech if I did so. But everything you see me do on my own is for that specific reason. It's because I know this. It's all about who you know. And you want the kind of connections that this man has, because he just beat the internet. So he's going to walk on everything. Allegations are very hard to maintain in a court of law anyway. You know what I mean? You're talking about allegations from so far ago. And actually, I had a conversation with somebody who said that this might be a conspiracy. Somebody tried to throw him under the bus with these allegations that just apparently came out of nowhere at the perfect timing. Who the hell knows? But I know one thing. They erased everything from the internet. So don't be surprised if he's cleared, if he sues the Marion County Sheriff's Office, wins that in court, and gets his job back. It's just what it is. So they're saying that he was scapegoated because of public outrage. I would like for the Marion County Sheriff's Office, instead of hiding his information on the internet, show us exactly why he's guilty of what you're accusing him of, and all of this stuff can be laid to rest. Aside from that, there's always going to be questions. There's always going to be confusion about it. And there's going to be some people in his corner, and rightfully so. Remember, he still hasn't faced any repercussions about what happened to Cheryl Weimar. So, with that, folks, surviving Keith Turner is concluded. It's becoming too much of a hassle for me to obtain that interview with my friend Amanda. It's not worth, the strife that could come behind, interfering with her relationship, or presumably doing so. So if there's no risk, then I'll pursue it and I'll bring it to you guys later. Otherwise, I'm just gonna have to wait and see what happens.